I'm honored to be here and very happy to introduce these three wonderful authors. They're members of this chapter, they're friends of mine, and more than that, I am a big fan of their writing, and I can say without apology. For example, Sally, this book of Sally's has a different kind of a plot than you might ordinarily suspect, and cozy. Nobody fell over the teapot and scattered the biscuits all over the room this time. Izzy, Cass, Nell, and Bertie are approached by someone who wants to find out who they are, what is their identity. So getting together, they peel back layers of the past, bit by bit, uncovering secrets people had thought were safely hidden and opening old scars. So there's going to be many people very unhappy with those folks. And then for Lisa has written 20 books before this. And the 21st is her first sequel. Now, as much as I want to know what happens with Tucker and Sam and with a friend who looks like a bassoon, I'd also like to know what's going on with those guys from Airball, with Coach and those players. I would really love to do that. So I hope she gets around to that. And then Linda, of course, has written about Skeet. And we know that Skeet Penn's adopted son, Brian, has been through more trauma than anyone should in the course of a lifetime. And if you don't know that, shame on you. In this book, Brian falls head over heels in love. It is the first love, and no doubt will end the way my first love ended and all of your first love ended. And after 30 years or so, Brian's going to be able to look back at this and have a warm glow in his heart. So, ladies, please.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm excited to be here, and I want to thank you all for coming, and especially Beth Wasson, who is the National Executive Director of Sisters in Crime. So we're real excited to have her here. And I'm really excited because Every Hidden Fear has been getting some great reviews from reviewers I really respect. One of who has a lot of clout with librarians, called it a must-read series. So and this year I did something different, and I had a pre-order contest, and I had requests that I bring the grand prize, which is still in progress.
Oh my heavens.
So this is the grand prize shawl. It's much larger than it looks because it's lace, and it will stretch way out, and it's not quite finished. It has to have edgings put on it. And Sue, where are you, Sue? Sue in the back there, won this in the pre-order contest. It's all baby alpaca and cashmere and merino and silk, so later on you can come up and pet it.
Well, there couldn't be a better winner. Sue must have made, I don't know, 1,000 things for other people knitting.
Anyway, Every Hidden Fear is the most emotional of the Skeet books that I've written yet. And Brian is going to fall in unrequited love, and Skeet is not going to know how to handle that. And my titles are usually thematic. And so this is a book about people dealing with the hidden fears in our lives that often control us and maybe cause us to do things that we would not ordinarily do. And it's going to impact pretty much everybody in the book, from small hidden fears to very large ones, to ones that even cause someone to commit murder. And so I'm very excited about it because it's really emotional, and Skeet does not do emotion well at all. So I really put her through the ringer with this one. And I hope you'll enjoy it, and I will pass on to Lisa.
Thank you. And I want to thank you all for coming too, and Beth also, who is, if you guys don't know, our headquarters for the whole national, international organization is in Lawrence. So she's just down the road. So that's kind of cool. And one of our founders is Nancy Picard. So yay for Nancy. Cool Beans is the sequel to The Adventures of Bean Boy, which I do school visits and I ask kids, I'm like, okay, I went to the University of Kansas, what do you think I majored in? And they all go, writing, and I say, no, art. And so my whole life I've drawn things, and as an adult I do graphic design, I do illustration stuff, but I've never, and I've written books, but I've never actually had a project where I did both together, and this is the first one that I actually did that. And the reason I did that is because the main character he calls himself a comic book genius. He loves comic books, he creates comic books, he draws comic books, and in this book he's entered a comic book contest. So throughout the book I've gotten to do all the his little sketches and little notes to his mother, plus all the little comic book, I don't know if I can find some, comic book art. There's a like a comic book story going on kind of parallel to the main story as he's drawing this comic book to enter this contest. So at the end of this, I'm kind of, as a writer, I'm kind of like a reader. I never want to let the characters go, so I came up with a sequel finally. And in this book, Tucker McBean, the main character who has created Bean Boy, his superhero, his superhero has something to do with, his superpowers have something to do with beans, and I didn't necessarily set out to write a book about excess gas, but it sort of happened that you can't ignore that. When you're writing about the power of beans, that's sort of the first thing that happens. And in this book, he's got a new nemesis, Wesley Banks, who is, everyone thinks he's like the superhero of sports in his small town of Wheaton, which, speaking of Lawrence, Wheaton is kind of like fake Lawrence. If you read the book and you know anything about Lawrence, you'll recognize Lawrence in the book. But anyway, so everyone, he's like this athletic guy that's good at everything. He's so wonderful. The whole town, the whole school, everybody thinks he's like this superhero of sports, but Tucker knows the real truth. He never uses his superpowers for good, so he's actually a supervillain in disguise. And in this story, Tucker's little brother, Beecher, wants this batting helmet so bad he can hardly stand it, and the nemesis, Wesley Banks, gets it first and he won't give it back. So they end up having to play into it in a dodgeball tournament, the art club against the super athletes, in order to get the helmet back. So I hope that if you don't like it, maybe one of your kids or grandkids will.
I happen to know one very intelligent, very astute reviewer who loves these books. He happens to be my 8-year-old grandson.
Thank you.
Now I'll bring it to Amazon.
Murder in Merino is the 8th book in the Seaside Knitters series, and you would think these darn things get easier to write. This is, of 35 books, this is the most difficult book I've ever written. And I got a quarter of a way through and I totally forgot how to write novels. I had no idea how to write. I wished I had written down instructions when I wrote the last one, so I know this. And I cried a little, and then I pounded on Nancy Picard's door, and she will testify that this was the most difficult book I ever wrote. But it's also my favorite. I think in all mysteries there's some secret that's buried and you kind of peel off the layers. But in this one, I went back 40 years and I talked about something that happened 40 years ago, and I tried to imagine these people because I can go back 40 years ago and imagine what life was like when I was not 10. What if something happened and it was too late to reveal who did this? It was too late to bring it to the public's eye. Somebody knew about it, but it would just hurt more people to reveal it. So it was buried for 40 years. And then somebody comes back to town looking for her past. She's actually never been in this town, but she feels some sort of affinity for it, so she comes back. And my 4 main characters, who range in age, as probably most of you know, from 30-something to 80, They band together. They're not sure they even like this lady at first, but then they kind of do, and so they get to know her, and they start helping her reveal her past. And then a murder happens. And somehow it's up to all of them to connect what's happening now to what happened 40 years ago. And the person who knows all about it kind of has to decide, maybe now it's worth revealing it because it might change someone's life for the better. And so that's what this, and so I was connecting all these things and drawing lines and crying and finally it worked out. And I hope you'll enjoy it. I did like this book, and I'm glad you said it was a little different because it felt a little different to me as well. And I know you all want to be out in your gardens, so keeping this short. Serious is what's next for me.
I also forgot how to write books, and I'm now actually kind of stretching my muscles a little bit. I'm going to write a YA next, starring a girl, because all my books for some reason end up with boys. But it's about a girl who accidentally orders a fairy godmother on the internet.
I love that.
Well, and my next one is, which I'm going to start Monday, I hope, is going to be number 4 in the Skeet Banyan novel, where Skeet and her Gran and Brian all have to go down to Tahlequah, Oklahoma, where her maternal family are, because Skeet's estranged mother calls and her hated stepfather is suspected of a murder down there, and she's got to come out and clear his name. So it's going to be called Every Family Doubt. It's going to deal with a lot of family.
You already know the title. That's disgusting.
Well, I need to know the title, and then sometimes they change a word or two, but I need to know the title because it's thematic and it lets me know. I don't know the plot yet. I know the situation and the title, and I don't know who's going to get killed or why.
Judy, you had your hand up?
Yes, Sally and Linda. Are your covers by the same artists?
I don't think so.
No.
Because they look a lot alike. I mean, I'm
Beautiful.
So
Yeah.
there's,
sitting on the shelf, I go,
Ah,
oh,
that's interesting.
yeah.
Who's yours by, Sally?
Mine are by Doug Martin. He's an illustrator and he's retiring. And so he sent me a note the other day and I said, well, that's too bad, you can't. He said he might come out of retirement to do the 9th book. So I'm hoping he will. I don't really have control over that, my publisher does, but hopefully.
Well, that would be
they'll-
terrible to have him retire.
I know. It's
No, don't let that happen to mine. Actually, I love my covers. St. Martin's gives me beautiful covers. It's the same artist and the same designer through the whole. They're both freelance. Most of the designer is actually in-house with St. Martin's, but the artist is freelance with a big agency that contracts out freelance artists. And when my first book was going to come out, they said, we want to show something in the cover about your interesting Native American protagonist. And I thought, oh my God, we're going to have Sioux chief headdresses and Navajo squash blossoms. And so I sent this very carefully worded long email to them about the differences between tribes and the eminent Cherokee history. And then I sent them a big PowerPoint of Cherokee art symbols, and I sent them Sequoia's syllabary, the Cherokee alphabet that he invented. And they were so great. The first book had little Cherokee symbols hidden in it, and he created a font just for this book based on the Cherokee syllabary. They've used it on every cover. And so I love them, and I love the covers they do, you know. And,
yeah, but you
and
had,
he can never retire. Not until I do.
We had a question back on this side.
Yeah, I was going to ask for all of you, how much do your editors have a say in like what you're going to write next? Because these are all sequels. So I mean, how much do you talk to them before you really settle on an idea?
I send in like a one-page synopsis, And the final book, and she will say, well, maybe you need to delve more deeply into this character, or you're bringing in too many new characters, which is a problem with series when you're developing a town. It's too much for the reader to handle, but you hate to keep killing off people you really like. So she does this. And that the reader, so she gives me some feedback, and I start writing, and the final book has nothing to do with the synopsis.
Yeah, I do a one-page synopsis, actually usually shorter than one page. They often use my synopsis for the jacket copy, and that can be kind of embarrassing because some of the names change. And as a matter of fact, if you look on Amazon right now, the cover copy for Every Hidden Fear has the wrong father's name up there. You know, it's left from that synopsis. I don't think it makes any difference to anybody, and it seems to be impossible to get Amazon to change it, so we don't know that. But then before we go to contract later, and then they say, yeah, we want to see that one, and I start writing. And then before we go to contract, they want to see, you know, a couple of chapters and everything, usually the first chapter, and then we go to contract. But they very seldom make any changes at that stage. I have to say my editors are pretty good about, except that my editor really wanted me to change the ending in this book, and it's the first time we've ever really gone with the maths over something.
Who won?
And I did pretty much, you know. I put in a sentence to maybe lessen the dramatic impact just a little, and but yeah, I felt it was really, really important, and when I explained it to her, then she said, okay, all right, you know. But we did kind of go back and forth, and I love my editor. We're good friends, but we did go back and forth with some rather heated exchanges on that.
Oh, yeah. Well, this is just, I haven't got like 9 in a series or anything. This is just the second, and I wanted to do the sequel, and everybody at the publishing house wanted a sequel, so I sent a couple of chapters and a synopsis, and I thought it was great, and my editor said, yeah, you know, bringing the dad back, because Dad lives in Boston, and bringing him back, that's just too emotionally, you know, it's just too much of an impact. And I was like, well, we're supposed to have emotional impacts in books. That's the whole point of fiction. But I said, okay, so, you know, and I was being dutiful, and I said, okay, well, we'll take that out. She goes, I think you got enough in the story without the dad. And I thought, I have nothing in the story without the dad. So I worked, and I wrote, and I was kind of chasing my tail, and I finally said, you know what? I don't care what my editor wants. I'm going to write this, you know, and I didn't write about the dad, but I just started writing, and I thought I'm just going to write the book. I'm going to finish it. She'll either like it or not when I get finished. And by that point, I think she forgot the whole conversation. So she liked it, and we got it published.
That's great.
Is there going to continue the series?
This, I don't know. I have, if anybody's read the first one, the antagonist / sort of not antagonist toward the end, and the first one is named Sam Zawicki, and she's this really mean girl that's small but tough. And she has some problems of her own. She's raised by her grandfather. They have kind of a truck farm, and they go to the farmer's market, and they sell their vegetables, and they've had issues and different things. And I just think she might need her own book at some point. So it wouldn't be exactly a sequel because it wouldn't have the same main characters and the same kind. But I'm thinking she could have like we could also have pictures in that, because I'm thinking if she's keeping like a gardening journal or something, and she's helping her grandfather. So that's an idea, but so far we haven't talked about it others.
You have so many ideas. Would you come to my house?
Back to my cover question, and I have another question. Did you illustrate your cover?
I did not. All the interiors and the back covers I did. This cover was done by Dan Santat, which I thought I was going to have to do but I thought I was going to do the front cover too. But then they said, oh, we got Dan Santat. And I was like, let him do it, because if you don't know him, he's a very famous illustrator. He's also writes and picture books and different things, and he's also creates animated series like on the Disney Channel, The Replacements. And he's just amazing. So I thought, well, shoot, I'll have Dan Santat do my cover. He was too busy to do the second one, so they got a different guy, but I think that he did a really
love the second
I do too. I love all the clouds up here with and then the ominous shadows. I love that. I think they did a really good job.
And it worked so well with Sally's and my cover. Those of you who got the flyer saw it, and when you look on the cake, you'll
Yeah,
see
it
them
really
all
looks
together.
nice.
They
Yeah.
just, it was like they were all designed to go together.
And Linda's the one asked her that. And she said, well, you'll just know. But not now. So,
Yeah, by the way, it's not now.
I think it's when, you know, I have ideas for the next skeet and the one after that, and I know the 2 books after this one, what's going to happen there. I have no idea after that. And I think when the ideas stop coming, when I'm not excited about writing another book in that world, I have lots of other ideas too. So that's the time to stop this series and write something else.
It seems like the last one needs kind of a wrap-up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you want to do
Nancy,
that.
did you do that? Did you plan the end of your series?
Plan is a strong word. I don't remember.
I was talking to, I don't know if any of you have read Claire O'Donoghue's books. She
Yes.
writes, and she was, it's an interesting question because she is trying to wrap up a series. And she thinks this book is her last book because she's married off the people that needed to get married off. The grandmother's happy now, and the gal is happy and happy. So she's thinking this is the end. But she when I asked her, well, for sure, she said, well, I'm not sure. But she, excuse me?
Which series?
What's the name of Claire O'Donoghue's series? It's about quilting. No, it's a cozy. She writes 2, and one's more hard-boiled, and one's a cozy.
Oh, double cross, let me see, Drunkard's.
Yeah.
Someday quilts.
Someday.
yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah. She's a good writer. They're interesting.
I think it was Stephanie Meyer with Twilight, who wrote 13 books in the story and then stopped because they were sort of fantasy horror, and she figured 13 was enough.
I have a question for Linda and Sally. In your books, you have such a sense of place. Do you find that you're tightening that, or are you moving away from where you began? Is it changing for you, your sense of place in the stories?
Well, the next book after this one is still in Brewster, Missouri, 12 miles north of Kansas City and very tightly tied to Kansas City. The next one, it's going to start there, and then they're going to move down to Tahlequah. And so most of that book will take place in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, which is the home of the Cherokee Nation and is a fabulous, incredible little town. And I think I'll have just as much a sense of place. It's just going to be a little different place then. And then after that, it will be back tied up here again.
I feel more tied to it with each book. I feel it becomes more integral to who they are. And every now and then someone will suggest, well, why not take them on a knitting cruise or something? And I just can't quite leave Sea Harbor. I feel it's too, and also I spend more time in the real Sea Harbor each year, so I get to know it better. And I love what I know, so I don't want to go on a cruise. I never liked cruises.
We know what Brewster is. Will Tahlequah be Tahlequah, or will it be another name?
No, it's going to be Tahlequah.
Going to be
It'll be
Tahlequah.
really Tahlequah. And it's a very unusual, very picturesque town. And I love it. And my husband loves it because of the restaurants. So there'll be restaurants. Ben is he does the restaurant research. Like Salmonella's Chicken, which is actually a pizza place. Of course. Really the best pizza you've ever eaten.
Do publishers still contract for a series anymore, or do they just look at the first one and then say, well, I think there could be sequels to it? Or, I mean, I know it's a changed world, and does it depend on the author, or does it depend on the publisher? Or
probably depends partly on the book you want to write. And if mine began as a series, I mean, I knew from the start, and so I signed a 3-book contract before I wrote them. And then I signed another 3-book, and then
So they usually ask.
So I signed the contract
Okay.
before I start writing them.
And you knew you
And
had at
I
least
knew-
2 or,
I knew I had at least 2 or 3, and now I know I'll have 11.
okay.
And then God knows what will happen.
Well, and my first book won an award, and so it was a single book contract because of that award, you know. And then they offered me, because we always knew it would be a series, and then they offered me a multi-book contract. But my agent and I talked about it and decided that given the publishing world in transition the way it was, we were actually better off doing single book contracts. And now I think a lot of publishers, especially with newer writers, are going to just a single book, and they're not tossing out as many. For somebody established, they would offer the multi-book, but not. But I think my agent made the right call there. I do.
Lisa, the school setting in your books, is it your school setting that you remember?
Yeah, it kind of is. It's kind of a conglomeration. Obviously, I grew up in Tonganoxie, which is a smaller town than fake Lawrence. But I kind of used some of that. And then I did a school visit in Tonganoxie at the middle school just this last week. And the secretary in the book is named Louise. And they go, our secretary's named Louise. I'm like, why do you think that is? Yeah, the school secretary. So yeah, I kind of use a conglomeration of different things. But the apartment they live in like an old Victorian kind of house on the edge of the campus, and there's like a nasty little apartment, and the landlord calls it the patio apartment or something, and then the garden apartment, excuse me, and then they have the first floor, and then his family lives in the top floor, and that's actually the house that I lived in on 18th and Mississippi when I went to college. Yeah. And I didn't live in the garden apartment, I lived upstairs.
Juliet, did you have a question?
No.
Juliet does not have a question. So I have a question. Is there ever a time that you're not writing a book?
No. I've just finished a different one.
I don't think so.
Okay, I find that. Yes.
Linda, you mentioned to me about a month ago you're moving into the world of film. Is that-
Oh, I had a short story that was published in the anthology Kansas City Noir, and it's been optioned for film. And you know, film options doesn't necessarily mean they'll get made. I think it probably will, because it's a small company that's had some very good success in the past, and they're looking at making an indie film and then trying to get picked up by a studio for distribution. And the screenwriter actually has sat down and talked with me about what he wants to do with the screenplay. And we walked through the area that I wrote the story about, and also I feel real good about what's going to happen. There's no guarantees it'll get made, but if it is, I think it's going to be another Winter Spot.
We can hope.
Wow.
Unlike those films that take only the title from the book and do nothing more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is the name of the publication where your short story is published?
It's Kansas City Noir. They have copies of it here.
Yeah, I think they checked in the local section.
Akashic Books is a press in Brooklyn that was founded by an old rock star band. What?
Johnny Temple.
Yeah, but Johnny Temple I know. But what was his band?
What is that?
He was a
does
big-
Akashic Books.
He was old punk rock star, and he used his rock money to found a small press that does mostly literary and poetry, but then he started this series of anthologies of crime short fiction set in distinct locales that use crime writers and literary writers both looking at it. He calls it, Vacation on the Wild Side or something like that. And there's like 30, 40 of them. Big success.
I'm a bookseller, what can I do? And Nancy Picard has a story in this as well.
Yes, yes.
And they're all just fantastic. All of them are local authors. Daniel Woodrill has a story here as well. They're all fascinating because they happen here in the metro area. So you're reading this story, getting slightly creeped out, and you're realizing, oh my God, Warwick Parkway. I'm Warwick Parkway.
They're all set in neighborhoods in Kansas City.
And
They're
Steve
all
Paul
supposed to
from the Star
be
edited it.
edited, yes.
And the whole series is in different cities. That's what's really fascinating. It's like Seattle noir. And it's a great way to learn about noir writing as well, because they're really true to the genre.
And noir is a darker, I will tell you this, it's a darker form. You know, many years ago when I was young. And then I wound up a single mom, going to school full-time, working full-time, and novels take a big chunk of time, so I started doing poetry. And for years, that's what I did. I wrote poetry, and I published poetry, and I won some awards with poetry, and so I was kind of in the literary world, and poetry was my thing, and then I wound up unexpectedly out of my job with the university because I developed an autoimmune disease. And after we got that all under control and I didn't think I was going to die, it was like, oh, this is my chance to write novels. And so the first of the Skeet novels came out of that time.
I'm sorry, I think that's my phone. It's my editor calling.
He wants to give you another multi-book contract.
That's right. Yeah. You know, I was thinking as you were talking, I think I really started to love writing when I took a philosophy class from Sister Rosemary Flanagan, who was an English teacher at heart, and she corrected every single thing. She made us write these long essays about philosophers, which, by the way, this is the first book I've been able to use my philosophy background in. But it's here. I talk about Plato. He's very important in the story, too. But from then on, I was always writing, whether it was fiction or nonfiction. When my kids were really, really little, I met a dear friend. We were sitting in a sandbox together, and we were both teaching English at Johnson County Community College, and decided we wanted to be home with our little kids. So the two of us sat down, and we wrote like a dozen or so romance novels together. And then we went our separate ways because she moved, and we both did that for a while. And I started writing mysteries when my friend Nancy Picard was working on two at the same time, and she said, why don't you help me with one? And I said, but I've never written a mystery. And she said, well, that's okay. I said, you can write a book. So I learned from a master the pieces. I didn't ever think I could write a mystery. I thought you had to be really good at math for some reason. So Nancy helped me put the right things in the right place, and then I had an opportunity to write a short series for a small publisher, and I wrote 3 of those. And somehow my New York agent found one of those, and she said, "Oh, let's do this big time." So I stopped that series, and I went with her.
The only numbers you have to know is that the pages go in sequence.
That's
Other
right.
than that, I'm not sure how math enters into it. Yes.
I have a Sisters in Crime question.
We have the expert here.
We had a customer come in who was a collector, and so he was showing me some of the old pulp mysteries or crime fiction stories where the covers are just amazing. But usually on the covers, you have the big strong male and the scantily clad female clinging to him, in a desperate way. And it made me think a lot about just how, at least since I've been alive and reading, how female characters have changed in the books over time.
Yeah.
And then how women have really come to dominate, at least from my perspective, crime fiction as far as authors go. And how women as the readers have dominated crime fiction as well, because a great Sisters in Crime study showed that women, over a certain age, we're all sisters, right? Are predominantly the majority readers of crime fiction. So I was just curious if you guys had thoughts of what's impressed you about that change over time as a reader or as authors, or I mean, even Lisa's book has this great spunky little character called me, or B-Boy does. So,
Probably Nancy Drew.
Yes.
I mean, everybody says that in every author talk. But it's true. I mean, she was spunky
yeah.
and strong, and I think those of us, I mean, Nancy knows the history probably better than anyone here. But I do think people who got into writing them when she did, their female protagonists were really gutsy and strong, and that's what the public wanted. And then through Sisters in Crime, they got these books noticed, which was why, as I understand it, why Sisters in Crime was formed. And Nancy was one of the founders of that, but to bring more attention, because the New York Times and places like that review books weren't paying attention to female authors, and now they are. Maybe not as much as they should, but they're still fighting.
We still do the Monitoring Project, which counts reviews about women in different publications, and there's still a disparity. But you're exactly right. That study that we have on our website about reading habits, the female over 50 is most likely to buy a mystery with the female character. So there's kind of, but that doesn't add up necessarily to all the books that are sold.
Yeah.
And what authors are paid.
What authors are paid
It's a
never.
really good point.
What authors are paid never.
And sometimes when I read a male author who's trying to do a female voice,
Oh,
and I find that it's discombobulating because the person's thoughts in the book are never any thoughts that I would ever remotely have in any kind of situation like that. So,
you know, some male authors can do women's voices well. Most male authors don't do them as well as most women authors do male, and I think it's because women have always been, they've always been kind of the underclass. They've always had, from the time they're born, they have to be paying attention to men. They have to be watching how they feel, how they act, what they're going to do, trying to stay out of trouble. Well, little girls, we start with little girls, letting them know men are a danger to women and little girls in this, you know, and you...
Not all men.
You know, no, but I mean, men in general. This is, of course, not any of the wonderful men here.
Right.
And guys, you know, they talk about it in high schools now, and the guys are just stunned to find out what the girls who are their classmates have to go through in terms of security that they never have to worry about. And so women are in a position where they have to pay attention to men and what men are thinking and feeling and what they might do. Men are never in that kind of position with women, and they have to make a special effort to get to that position. And a lot of men who write don't. So a lot of men who write women from a woman's point of view, and it's a man's fantasy woman. It's a woman who basically wants to please every man out there or something like this, you know. And so it doesn't ring true, but that's why.
It's very interesting you should say that, because in a book group I used to be in, that often the books we read where the author was male, we did not like the female characters. Did not like them.